Well, thank you very much for the presentation. And thank you very much, Rafael, and to the House of Architecture for the invitation tonight here. It's such a beautiful place, no? It seems very interesting structure. And right now we're talking about this somehow new association of architects that in the end I think is something always important, something always to celebrate, no? That there is an excuse to spend a while together and to talk about architecture, and I'm happy to hear that this, let's say, new association of House of Architecture is going on from right now 7 years ago, and it's nice to see so many people here and some friends also, so thank you very much. Well, tonight I will try to pass by our work, by the work we developed in our office through this very exciting item, no? That is MATERIA. No? I thought it was very interesting, the test you sent to me, and after reading it, well, I decided to speak about 4 projects, I think maybe they are the 4 projects that explain better our work. We don't have so many, so it's easy to find and to choose them. And but like we were talking before, I will try to do it through this element. The 4 projects have different context, different material, no? That is different. It doesn't talk only about the material itself, but talk about something deeply, more deep. And let's say that I would like not to explain so much the project, so much because that's easy to find in magazines or in books, but I would like to pass by then, trying to explain the process, try to explain which points are in common in some of them, and how I hope you could recognize some decisions in projects that have been built in very different way, no? But I think that is something important, and I would like to say, mainly to the younger people, no? That like architects, we have to find our interest. In that way, if we find our interest and we start to research in a line, we can improve. What I mean is that it is not possible to start to make architecture each day or from each competition, from each project. No, I think you have to find what are you interested about and why, or how let's say that deadline is going on during the time. No, so in that way, when you don't win a competition, that is quite common, you don't waste time. No, you are inside of your personal interest, your personal line, and somehow, time by time, that line becomes something, I think, more interesting. No? I would like to talk about our work in that term also. Well, the first 2 projects I will explain, they are on a urban context, let's say, different one. One of them is close to a Roman temple, so it is a very special archaeological place. The second one, it is outside of a small town in a kind of factory industrial area. And then I will talk in the second part of the lecture about 2 other projects that have more relationship they are more related to landscape, to a territory, to a more natural territory, we could say. Let's talk about territory, urban territory or natural territory, but in quite many points, like you will see, we answer in the same way to contexts very different. Well, here in the first project, we found this situation. We are talking about Merida. You can see, on the screen, it doesn't work, this, okay. Anyway, you can see the situation that we found when we started with the competition. Here we have the more important Roman temple in Spain. It was not very well preserved, and it was, with all this situation around where we couldn't, or somehow, the first question we did was, okay, maybe the project or maybe the competition is not right, and what we have to do is not to build a new building around it, but to try to keep as much of that void that time by time, taking small houses or things around, let's say the government managed to get. No, for me it was more important the space around, and we try to explain to the archaeologists how that could become the important point of the project. Not so much to build or to say to rebuild, no, the construction that the Roman temple has time ago, but let's say to reload the place, no, to find the right traces, the right geometry. So again, that building could have a right position, a right answer to the city itself. No? So we started to understand, no, this chaotic facade, backside facade that they were focusing they were looking to the temple, and at the same time we use these very sample drawings from historical drawings of how they thought. Archaeologists and historians thought that this was the situation that the Roman temple have. No? Of course, we should understand that everybody knows that the temple, it was, well, I can't mark. It was situated exactly in the center of this grid of Cardos Decumanos that everybody knows, no? Of a Roman grid, very orthogonal, and that, how you can see, the buildings around it, they made a kind of background for controlling, for, let's say, framing this void, this archaeological void that for us was very important, and we use that word always with archaeologists. So the idea was not so much to rebuild all that buildings around, but to, like I said already, to find the right geometry and the proper trace to this building. In that way, it was important to understand that, of course, architecture is made always by the addition of some other buildings. No? Here you can see an old Renaissance palace that was added to the structure, to the old columns of the temple, and using them like foundation, no, of the house itself. So in that way, we started to work with that limit. We started to put order on this area around and trying to find different rules that in the end become a kind of mix between very orthogonal rules answering to the old architecture, the Roman ancient architecture, and more chaotic, more, let's say, less controlled rules that answer to the persistent interstitial spaces of the city itself. In that way, we got this small model in the competition that we didn't like too much, if I'm honest to you, but it was the result to apply some rules. In that way, we started to work for several, in this case was for several years because it was a long project, always thinking on how to rebuild that new limit that, like, it should answer on the back side to the interstitial spaces and in the front to that Roman old trace. Of course, in the end, we wanted to leave as empty as possible the ground floor, to keep the void around the temple, and to create a new limit that will be a new shadow. Because we think, at least in Spain, public space become public when you have a shadow. Without the shadow, it is very difficult to manage outside in Spain. No? So we were working very much on that limit, and in the end, I think this diagram explains very well. We have that very regular axis, very regular street in the Roman period. Afterwards, all that was lost, Some of them still you could recognize, some of the streets, but in the center, close to the temple, it was a medieval, let's say a medieval order that didn't answer anymore to that situation. So the first thing we have to do, it was to realize that for making the project, we have to change the regulations. It was not possible to answer to the building using the, let's say, regulation that it was going on right now, or even answering to that street, to that structure, urban structure that we found. Here you can see how from a very regular border we started to organize a little better, and then in the end both structure gave like result that plant. I like that complexity, no? To answer both controlling some rules and leaving free some others. In that way, we knew from the beginning what was going to be the result of the project, but we didn't have the last shape, the last limit, let's say, of the project until the really end. Like I said, we have to change some regulations. For example, it was a street cross our site. Here you can see it. Or both in these edges, we didn't respect the street itself, no? So in the first one, the one that is crossing their place, the building was passing through over the street. No? It was more important, the old traces, than the present traces we have right now here. Well, here you have an image from Google Earth. You can understand such a compact city where you can recognize the theater, amphitheater, Roman theater and amphitheater, the Roman Museum from Rafael Moneo, right here, and all these high, dense, very, very compact city where we just feel free all this void as much as possible. No? Okay. Anyway, you can see it very clear on this image. And of course, what is interesting is that a very rigid order, like I already said, talking about the Roman traces, no, we tried to keep the same space around. It became a new opportunity because the interstitial spaces broke somehow the pure rules that we already did, and it gave a new complexity, new opportunities to the uses that we had on the first floor. Well, the plans, the ground floor is almost empty. Oops. First floor, just a kind of megastructure that what we will see now. We just work with one material. The material was very important here. You will see later. And how I like to make this. I like to compare both images. No, you can see in the first one of these drawings that you use for making a model. You know, it's quite nice because you have been cutting the model on the paper itself, so you see the marks of it. So maybe it was one of the first documents we did. And here you have a technical drawing from the structure, but different things. No, like I already said, they are. If you analyze them deeper, you will see that there is not any line that it is the same position, but you are able to recognize the project in both documents. The strategy, the rules were already decided, they were clear, and like I already said, the last plan we got it in the end. That is a good way of working because that gives you freedom. It gives you as much freedom as you need when you have to deal with the neighbors, when you have to deal with so many problems that appear during the construction and during the building itself. No? Here you can see we work with concrete, with 60 centimeters wide walls, and just one material that should respect the old rooms from the Roman time, with this kind of balance in between, and this big platform that will allow you to walk around all this complex and will give us this big shadow under it, and the program, all of it lift up to the first floor. So in the end, somehow we are doing a new layer to the city. We are giving a new layer in the same way than that painting we saw in the beginning with the, let's say, this Renaissance palace using the temple structure itself. So here you have an image of the construction where, like you can see, it is impossible. We couldn't know how was going to be the final limit. Each neighbor have his own rules. We have to, well, it was so complex, no? But in the end, well, we got this answer, no? I think from this image we can talk so much about MATERIA because here you can understand how the square itself it became a new public space on that compact piece of city, but at the same time it is an archaeological space, and that is important to realize. No, it was so important also to change the regulation that we couldn't use this, well, I don't know, the stone they use for every street. We have to keep it on earth, on a kind of earth, and in that way you have the feeling when you arrive to the place that it is not only a public one. No, it's something else that it is more complex. No, it's a kind of room that you can see in the middle of the city. Of course, that was not easy also because they wanted to preserve the temple as much, so they wanted to make a fence around like it was before we started with the project, and that was also something we had to do to change the point of view of the people. No? So in the end, they realized that the more important thing it was to put in value the building itself, and that we were doing it was just to frame again a space around and to refill it with some program that will give new life to the site. So in that balance between archaeological site and between public space, it was, in my opinion, the key of the project. No? So the rest of is not too much more. No, it's just this kind of contrast between the old city that we never tried to hide or nothing like that. We just made an infrastructure that allow us to hold and to use all these interstitial spaces for different uses on the first floor. And the city is there. We didn't keep it. We didn't hide it. It was like it was. It was not, let's say, part of a project. No, so. You can see just almost one material. We use some stone from the area, and we made the concrete just with white cement and a kind of sand, kind of varied, very similar to from where the stone of the temple was coming from. So in that way, we got a kind of very similar texture, no? That it made, I think, a good background to the building. Like you can see, we just leave the buildings at their own conditions without painting them, anything. No, we just defined our limit. In this case, you can see the building is passing over the street because we have to create a more, not a, let's say, dynamic space, but a more state place. No, well, and there are some images. Here's the shadow I already explained, no? And I think it's interesting because in this rings, and in this more irregular geometry, then appear this kind of richness of shadow that it changes so much depending on the moment of the day. Just some stairs that you can put up in night. Here's the street again, and of course all the ground floor was free to keep the different rest from Roman time. And in the end, the platform also there was some of the rest were on the ground, and we have the same way of answering, no? Somehow our construction, it was a neutral one, just made by the structure itself, all of it, with this thick wall that it was also supporting all the surrounding, all the neighborhood, and we just leave it on earth, like the rest of the project. Well, just I carry some pictures with activities, no? Right now, of course, in the beginning, it was a very difficult project. In the beginning, people was very much against the project, but afterwards it started to be used, and now it's one of the places that I think have more activities and more things are going on in Merida. Okay, the second project I will explain is a little factory that we made in close to Merida also, and we just finished it, so it's a project that I almost never show in a lecture. And we are talking about, the context is quite similar because still we are in a, let's say, urban, or well, let's say it's close to the city, but it is a very different, we have very different conditions, no? Right here you can see an industrial area without any interest at all, where usually storage factories appear on this kind of, well, on this very anodyne, very normal sites. But instead of that, we started to realize what it was the important point on the project. Well, again, in terms of traces, in terms of geometry. If in the first one, we have to find how to frame, again, that building. Here we have to realize which was the dimension of the, how do you say in English, no? The circulation of the track. No? The track itself, that it was the element that gave life and that gave, let's say, that it was the element that every day have to deal with the building itself, because we are talking about a factory from a factory of, how is it called, this electrical assemblage. It was a factory to assemble electrical machines, electrical elements, and that were always, the circulation of the factory itself was very, very important. So we decide, of course, let's study that traces, and let's try, instead of having an isolated factory and a big patio close to it, why not to put the patio inside of the factory itself and to work with a trace, with a perimeter building around it, giving more protection, we could say, to the patio and so on. So we work with very simple geometry, 2 squares, 1 square of 45 meters, the other one it is about 30 meters. But what is interesting in the geometry is that we just dislocate, we move 1 square from other, no? So in that way, we manage to have 2 sizes, 6 meters wide on 2 of the parts, and 9 meters on the other one. That is interesting also, no? That, like, the first decision, of course, was this 30 meters square that have to be with all the movement of the tracks themselves. Of course, then you also have a second hierarchy of movement inside of the building itself. But in this displacement, we managed to give to the more domestic part of the factory this measure, and the other one, bigger, is in the area of the storage and the working area, so on. Well, this is the second floor. It is 10 meters high building. Well, you will see now. And somehow, if in the first project the rules were, well, the decision has to be between that two geometries, one very regular geometry and the irregular one. Here, it has to be just with that displacement of both squares, no? And then section became all this, gave us all these possibilities. So we could adapt to the program to the different part of the building, and of course to make, let's say, the unit that will work all of it like a whole building. No? Different facade, structure, something always very important for us, to be very logical in terms of structure, and that the project show somehow how it works itself. And here you can have some images of how we built it. Very cheap building without any high technology. But it's interesting when you start to realize again a trace that gives order to all the construction. You can see the patio. And then it appeared, of course, if in the material, no? In the first project, we were talking that our material have to answer to the massivity of the temple itself, and we wanted to talk to it. We have to work with a very tectonic project, very massive building. Here it was the opposite, no? All the project is made only by one very cheap steel panel, just that we use almost in every detail. And what is very interesting, in my opinion, is that the same material we use from outside, it is used in the patio, inside, but also inside of every room. Of course, when we have to deal with the window, we have to keep it from the sun, from the sun. So we use the same material, just making several holes, but it's the same panel. So everything is solved on the same situation. Here you can see all this movement of the track itself. Here the different layers, no? That are all of them talking on the same atmosphere. I think the material itself should give, let's say, an atmosphere, a character to the building. No? So in the end, you have to recognize that you are here. You should understand when you're in the Roman temple of Diana that where you are. No? I think somehow it's not only the proper material in terms of economy or in terms of logical built, or however you call it, but it have to be also with the character of the place. No? We thought that a place where you work with electrical machines, with electrical components, it have to be with this material. No? So we decided to use it. This, well, I don't know how you call it in English, no? But it is this, ¿cómo se llama? Galvanizado, no? Es un metal galvanizado that is changing during the day, no? We will see also like how, depending of the light, depending of the moment of the day, the colors, the brightness, everything you get is completely different, no? If in the first project we could realize how the light was passing through the patios, as was giving that kind of irregular shadow, irregular shape on the floor, here is the opposite, how the brightness of the building changed very much depending of the orientation, so on. But always the same material, always working, almost with the same element everywhere, no? Here you can see how that panels are protecting our windows from the sun. Oops. No? You can see on both of the drawings, like we have always the structure inside of this double, this facade made by double, by 2 layers of steel panels, all of them. And when you have the window, how that one it's moving. No, I think that is also one of the decisions of the technique we apply on this project. That the planes itself, they are moving a little when you have a door or when you have one of these kind of brise-soleil on the top of the windows, no? Creating this situation. It's a project made by very low budget, but we were working. We have 10 meters high panels. All of them are made in once. Yes, but very simple system that all of you will know from every factory almost. No? And again, the situation that you are outside, but you are inside, you don't know exactly where are you. There are your pictures. The light appear always on the corners that they are lower. No, you have like 4 big stores of 10 meters high, and when you go to the plan, when you go to the corners of the patio itself, that height go down depending on the necessities of the square meters. So you have a better ventilation, cross ventilation. You get the light always from that point. No. All the windows can be moving. First of all, they have this brise-soleil. Afterwards, you have a glass door that you just can put inside of the wall. So you have the flexibility to go in through the patio inside, outside, in a very flexible way, no? Depending on the necessities of the factory. Okay, now, which inside we go to the more, let's say, rural area, and I will show you 2 projects that have to deal with, let's say, with a kind of a sports program. No? The first one is a little rowing pavilion that it is situated in front of this lake. Here you have. And somehow, if in the first project we have a very clear, well, a very unclear perimeter to a very unclear site, but of course we have a, let's say, an old trace that gave a sense to the project itself. In the second one, it was the movement of the tracks would give a sense, in my opinion, to all the factory. All the factory have to deal with that circular movement. Here, we didn't have a real, we have such a strange site, no? You can see it here. No? It was a kind of cross of 2 roads, 3 roads. It was an area close to the lake, and so we didn't like too much that geometry. And in the end, after we started with the competition, and we realized that in the end, what you need for a rowing center or rowing pavilion, it is only a big space without any pillar, any element, so you can move these quite long boats, and you can make different acts, like today here. So in the end, we realized that we only need a kind of square, in this case of 21 meters square, that will become a kind of covered patio, in this case kind of patio, and the rest of the site, because we have to take we took the shape of the site itself. So the rest of it, and the interstitial spaces that we, let's say, force after deciding to take in consideration and to make our project on that square, it was the rest of the uses of the, we use it for the rest of the necessities of this center. No? Of course, for saving such a big room, we need a big structure on it that will support all the roof and it will the structure. Then what you can have here we had some bedrooms, the storage for the boating, the boat storage, a kind of gym, dressing room, well, different facilities around that new space that it was the rowing center. Here you had the section, a model with the site. It was not a nice town, but of course it was important, the view they had over the lake. And so we decided to have a quite narrow building. Here you can see on the section. So in the end, the section became a kind of quite classic section of platform and this like belvedere on it. We have been seen so many times in the history of architecture. But what is interesting on it is that it works in different way. Usually you have a platform and you put on this pavilion. But here is the opposite. The pavilion is made by a quite high structure, metal structure that support what is happening here under on the ground floor. No? So let's say that we change the rules, and in that way, this belvedere becomes something more complex. No? That we think it was necessary, no, for having this empty central space on the rowing center. So here you can see the new square, and that structure that support all the strength from the roof. So, of course, the structure have enough highness for entrance through it and for hanging a very longitudinal ramp that allows people to enter to this central square where, of course, you also had access to it by such of two big doors that in the end are like a kind of a street, no? That we wanted to give this to this space a kind of again of character of public space somehow, no? It covers public space. Here you have the section, you can see it better. This big beam structure. The ramp hanging from the structure itself. And again, it appears a very clear structure that will be the new facade, it will be the image of the center, we could say, no? Well, on that drawings, you can understand how it works and how the ramp is hanging from the structure itself. And here, you realize that in the end, we are doing a kind of element that is working from behind, but of course we will use like a big shadow entrance, an entrance with a shadow itself and a new public space that will appear on the pavilion. I think that's also very interesting that when we manage to not only answer the necessities of the commission or the client itself, but we also give something else, no? For me, it's one of my interests are public space, no? So we always try to find possibility to work with public space on our proposals, even if they are not asking for it. you can see how the material here was just all these huge kind of steel metal beams and cables hanging over, and always working, in this case, just with this wall of very industrial element. I will show you some images from the construction. I think it's nice when all this thought become material. You can realize what is the more important part of the project, Union Square. And then how this Belvedere support is holding all that, everything that is happening under. Of course, when you are on the boat, you are exposed to the sun all day. So I thought it was also interesting to have a kind of a space, not dark, but quite protected from the sun. So here we already cover the central square, central room, and you can see like in the end the platform, it became a new square, a new place to sit for the people of the town, and the structure will become a new shadow. So the Rowing Center is giving something extra to the city. Somehow the structure is the facade is the elevation of the building is the structure itself. So you don't lose that view, that transparency that the building have, no? But when the building start to be used is when really you realize how, it's when it take interest, in my opinion. So in the end, you have both walls on this area and the ground that we will, on the ground floor that we will see, and this more complex situation, no? When you have to cross through the structure itself to go inside of the Rowing Center by the ramp hanging here, or just sitting on the border, where instead of having a rail hand, we work with, because for competitions or for training, it was good to have this kind of, I don't know how you call it, but sitting area, no, for the limit. So we saw it like that, and in that way, we thought we have a stronger relationship to the territory, no? Well, I just pass some images. And then inside this ramp and all this big space, here you have the ramp, how you enter to that empty room. And you can realize more or less what was, in this case, we tried to give the character to the building, to the identity of the building itself have to be with the feeling when you go down by the ramp, how you feel that the structure is working, is the ramp is hanging from it, also the roof itself. I don't know, I think this image explains quite well all that, this new character we gave to this little pavilion, no? Or here, no, where it was a photographer sent to us this picture, no? There was some people talking, or I don't know, and how in the end, that platform in night became a new place for the city, no? A new public place that, no? We could see also how, of course, the shadow around it allow us to use this part of the building also from outside, no? Without having the necessity to go inside of the building itself. Okay, and the last project I would like to explain, it have to be also with sports. We are in a quite similar area, well, let's say surrounding, we have quite similar surrounding. The context is again, one of these artificial, well, it's not a lake, it's an I don't know, it's an English artificial lake. Here you have the dam, so you control very much the level of the water. Right here on this image, the water is very low. And here we have an area that it was a peninsula, almost an island. So in this case, we have to deal with the 360 degrees all around the project. So this sports center, it was more complex, it was bigger, because it has to be with 12 different associations. Some of them were that association that deal with always sports associations, but they have to deal with the territorial, the landscape. No, there was some mountain things on different associations that have to do with the mountain, some rowing, some sailing, motor sailing, well, different activities that was going on these 12, let's say, workshop places. No, they just wanted a place where to stay, where to try their own material, techniques, so on. They wanted also, with this project, it was important to somehow to give a new identity not only to the building itself, but to all the area. It was a very low, it was an area without too much population. It was an area very virgin, very beautiful. That is in the north of Extremadura, close to Portugal, Salamanca, all that area. And they thought it was a good area to implement all these sports that have to be with nature. No? So the building itself should create an identity to all the surrounding. So after working, we realized that, of course, the better way to have a piece of, let's say, bank of water, it was to answer to the persistence, to the different traces that the water was giving. Well, I think I will explain better on the image, sorry. I will go back. It is more clear here. Right now, the level is down because the water is on the mountains, the snow. Afterwards, the level changed. So we decided to go as close as possible to the water and to try to repeat one of these marks that the water left on the earth itself. No? So we started to work with different geometries, and in the end, afterwards, we realized that the easier way to answer to this sports center, it was to have a more pure trace, a more clear trace that in the end it became a ring itself. What is interesting here was that it is the dimension of the building itself. If in the first one, in the Temple of Diana, we were working with this kind of infrastructure that somehow had the flexibility to have an empty ground floor and a first floor with different kind of programs, here the dimension is much bigger. We are talking about that the building have 200 meters of diameter. If you take a walk around the roof, it is 630 meters, so it's more than half kilometer. And I don't know, you can put, well, a football stadium inside of it, Santiago Bernabéu, maybe, from Real Madrid. So what I mean is that it's so huge that in the end you only can understand all the project, all the building itself, you only can see all of it from the earth. It's the only way of understanding it. If you are walking here around, you just can see a part of it. Why? It's not only because it's quite big, it is because, of course, the new layer have one level all of it, and the topography changed. So the first decision was to find the precise level, the highness of the building itself, and the right position to be as close as possible to the water. So in that way, each of these 12 associations have his position, the right one they could decide themselves. And of course, this area around where to try the material, the product, the techniques they use, so on, and the different competitions that are going on here, I will explain later. But in that way, of course, the topography changed, so the level that we choose have to deal with the persistent traces, no? In the end, the persistence of the site. Almost we can explain all the project from this image, no? Because of course, this big ring divides the territory in two, no? Somehow, when you add a new trace to the territory, what happens inside is different than what you have outside of the building. Here you can see it closer, or here you can see a piece of it. Of course, when you try to understand, when you see this image, you can realize that the rest of the project is all of it the same. But you also can see how through the trees, with the different topography, the building disappeared. No? So in that way, there was almost 12,000 square meters that we have to implement on this site instead of making a very massive building. In that way, let's say that the program lost itself between the trees and the vegetation. So we are always working with the same material, these panels of 5 meters high and 50 centimeters wide, that is allowing us to have somehow the colors and the brightness of the place. No? It is still less panels, but we have been broken the process before to have it very much bright, so you don't get really strong brightness on the facade itself, but you take somehow the colors and the movement of the trees and all this thing that is going on the site itself. The idea with the project was to create a kind of device that we insert here in this piece of territory, and we'll deal with it by contrast. No, we didn't want it. If in the first project you could see that the Temple of Diana have a kind of massivity, a kind of one material that have to be with we answer in the same way. Let's say here we decide that we have to do exactly the opposite. No. Of course, when you need a window, you just take away one of these steel panels, or you have this kind of patios, you just take away several of them. Rules were quite clear. The dimension of each of the 12 departments were not important for us. They decide by themselves, and afterwards, during the construction, we could change the dimension of all of them. Now we go back to the plan. So, like you can see, some of them are bigger, other one are smaller, but always you have the same rules, no? In the end, they are like autonomous buildings that have his autonomy by themselves, with an area with water, toilet, storage, so on, and always an space, open space in between, that there is this kind of porch, the covered courtyard, where you have also the vertical circulation, so on. Of course, a building like that, so big like that, is not senseless to be moving inside of it. So you, in the end, it's a mega structure that you just go up on one of these courtyard and you go from the roof to another of these different workshop areas, association, or you just move in diagonal, depending of the place where are you. No? So here you have the different buildings, we could say somehow, that, and the spaces in between, and how all of them, in the end, were going inside of the ring. So here you have the facade, but what is interesting is when you see the elevation, all of it, that we are talking about 630 meters elevation. So, of course, all the construction, every decision has to be very much thought and very, well, we repeat it until the end. And we managed to build the project in 7 months. It was the construction of the project. It was only 7 months because it was a project that we have to finish in very short time. Well, just some part of the project where you can realize what I already told you, that always the distance, the relationship that appears between the topography and the building is completely different. So after deciding which was the right level of the building, it appeared like that. In that way, it's very interesting because each part of the building is the same, but at the same time, it's completely different. Because sometimes you are on very high level, and other times you are very close to the ground floor. Well, now we go closer and closer. The same detail, just repeating all the time. Now I will pass by the construction. So for building in 7 months, we have to prepare some part of the building on the factory. In the factory, we carry it by trucks. We assembled it here in the site, and we made this kind of module that was going on in quite fast way. It was quite interesting because, talking in terms of material, the trees, all these verticalities that we could find in the site had to be also with our pillars, with our columns. So it was, well, I like this picture. And I remember how exciting it was that week when we arrived and we started to realize that the shadow was again here. So in some part of the building, two sides of the territorial, it is not a strong division, it's just the shadow who make a line, and that it is a kind of land art device that changed the rules that were already there. Here, when you already have this horizontal plan, that maybe is the more important thing that human made, like architect, the horizontal plan in the middle of the topography, suddenly things change, Here, or when you are on the roof, when the visitor is not anymore on the ground floor, that you are related to the trees, but to the top of them, the higher point. So each experience is different because each point is completely different because the bigness, because the huge scale of the building. And the construction is also quite simple. All steel. We just use the same logical in every part of the project. So we get this longitudinal infrastructure where to keep inside the different uses that will change in time. So we started with the different, also here we have low water, so we have all that spring, natural rings, and the artificial ring in a very beautiful moment of the construction before that we have to start to close the facade and the elevations, so you could understand the trace quite well, the geometry. Of course, like we have 360 degrees, all the orientations are in real time in each moment of the day, in each moment of the year. So the facade, some moment that you have a very messy facade, some other moment is very smooth, very bright material, depending on how, or here when the building is so close to the earth, but of course always following the same rules, having a space in between, respecting the same rules to all the project. Well, the construction I want to explain, more images, these steel panels that allow us to open windows or to open this kind of courtyards, and just very dry architecture. sometimes someone talk about architecture like naked architecture that have as little element as we need to give a new life to the place. No? So in the end, you just have an empty room with a place waiting for being used to be working, a workshop, or competition, whatever is going on, inside or outside of the center. I like this picture where you can understand very well what I said. No? Here it's like very smooth. It's like a kind of device, no? That it gets a strong contact to its sound context, or here in a longer scale, how it's dividing the place. It's quite nice because, of course, afterwards, this sport center that have a very long name, it became, well, everybody started to know it like the ring, no? And it's funny because the name itself, it was changed because the architecture, but what it was quite funny also was that here they won, well, the site, it was the first time, in the site they was celebrated the World Championship of triathlon, and the reason why this triathlon competition came here, it was because the judge realized that moving by the roof and moving all the competitions could go on somehow around the geometry of the building itself, and you could see, like the judge could see all the 80% of the triathlon because they managed to organize all the different running and bicycling and swimming, all the competitions are around the building itself. So somehow the geometry of the building, the character of the building, not only gave, it was giving let's say a character or identity to the place, but also to the competition itself, no? So it was quite funny when you understand, well, there are some pictures they send us sometimes pictures when they make different competitions here, and it's quite funny because, well, the way how they move here have to be with the geometry of the building. So even you can see here a boat that is maybe taking pictures or whatever, recording the competition, that have to be. So somehow that traces that were already there, that have to be with the island, well, are still have a sense still. They are using like that, no? Or here, well, this character of device that I think was interesting is quite well expressed on the image, no? Okay, this is all. Thank you very much.